Well, the new episode of Top Gear has just been aired yesterday on BBC Two with the new hosts, Chris Evans and Matt LeBlanc. And I went in and I wanted to watch it with an open mind, just to get a good gauge and just to see how it is. And my honest opinion is the new Top Gear was alright, actually. It wasn't bad. It wasn't as bad as everyone's been thinking it was going to be. I'm going to try and talk about each segment and what's been going on and all that, so hopefully this will work out fine. Oh, rather appropriate, Top Gear mug. Right, the first segment they did was with the Dodge Viper ACR, the new one, and the Corvette Z06. And they had Chris Evans driving the Viper and Sabine Schmitz driving the Corvette. And this is like a proper car review that they did at a US airbase. And it was a bit more on the factual side of things. They actually focused on what the cars were actually like to drive, rather than comparing things to that aren't cars, basically. Because, you know, in the old, when I say old, when Clarkson, Hammond and May were doing car reviews, they were comparing the car to something equivalent that isn't a car. Whereas in this one, they actually took the Dodge Viper and compared it to the Corvette, the main rival. And I thought that car review segment was actually pretty good. It wasn't spectacular by any means, but it was actually pretty good. It was somewhat decent, which is much more of a... It was a little bit more refreshing to see a proper car review rather than like larking about. I mean, there was a larking about section afterwards where they basically strapped laser guns to it, and they had a US air pilots in the actual passenger seats, and they were aiming the lasers at the other cars, and it was alright. It wasn't as entertaining as I thought, but it was a good segment to watch. It was good to see what the cars were capable of in the right hands, even though Chris Evans was obviously in the Viper, and he drove it pretty well. In all fairness, he did a really good drive of that car. But then he got Sabine Schmitz in the Corvette, and, well, you know what she's like already. So that was quite something. The next bit was the first part of... I'm sorry, I've got the Wikipedia page up. Was the UK versus US Challenge, where they drove from the BBC studio, the new one, to Blackpool in Reliant Rialtos. This is where I thought, personally, this was when Top Gear was at its weakest point. It didn't spark anything truly entertaining as such. It didn't feel like... I don't know. I just wasn't as engrossed in the challenge as I should expect to be. It wasn't my favourite segment. It was definitely the weakest point. Where I think at this moment where you've got Chris Evans in one of them, which was decorated in the British flag, and Matt LeBlanc, who was in another one decorated with the USA flag. And they were trying to mimic the humour and style of what Clarkson, Hammond and May had. I personally thought it just did not work at all. It was really weak. They were trying to be funny, but it wasn't working out. So, in personal opinion, in fact, this was the same throughout the second part, which was more towards the end of the episode, where they were in Land Rover Mark 1s and a Willys Jeep. And they were even towing, at one point, their Reliance along up a mountain. And again, it was still pretty weak. It wasn't great, to be honest with you. Next bit, obviously the guests they had Jesse Eisenberg and Gordon Ramsay. Okay, two very significant guests, I will admit that. And it was a very different way they actually did this segment, the interview segment. It was more focusing on what they were doing at the moment, and then they were focusing on what cars they've got at the moment. And I will say Gordon Ramsay in a LaFerrari. Okay. And then he dropped a bit of a moment when he announced that there was going to be a convertible version of the LaFerrari called the LaFerrari Spider, and only 100 were going to be made. And it was first announced through Gordon Ramsay, and he actually said, this is the key for it. It was uncut, but it was a key for it. And it was actually quite an exclusive thing to hear about, because You hear about certain cars being debuted on motor shows, but this was the first saying, oh yeah, there's going to be a Spider version of this car. No one knows about it. Only I do, and I've already ordered one of the hundreds that's going to be available. And it was okay. It was all right. It was good. And Jesse Eisenberg, they were talking about what cars that he drove. He doesn't even know a thing about cars. He even said that himself. The way they presented certain things as well, they had a giant screen this time. It used to be a telly, just a television in the centre of the stage. Now it's a giant projection screen. Okay, I can see that. It kind of works. That's actually a good way of presenting things. So the audience can see it better. I think, and that was another thing as well. The studio was set with a more audience oriented in mind, where they had an alternate level where the audience members can sit above and stand above and actually look over the studio. And there wasn't as big as a crowd. There was quite a lot of applause going on, but it was definitely a more audience focused program, whereas before it was more of a case of we interact with the audience, we take the piss out of them, and that's that. Whereas this one, they were more involved. One thing I will mention though, at the beginning of the episode, they made a little bit of a jape about catering. That was a really low blow. I'm really sorry, but that was such a low blow to give on something that happened months and even a year ago now, and they brought it back up again. No, wasn't good. Sorry, really low blow on that one. Going back to the celebrities, going back to the star in the reasonably priced car, which actually is no longer in a reasonably priced car. They brought on a Mini Cooper, which has been turned into a makeshift rallycross car, and they actually had a different track layout this time, because in the past it used to be, oh, here's the sports car, the supercar, whatever, they're going to drive that around the track. Then we bring on the guests and they're going to drive around the same track and they set the fastest lap time possible. They did the car driving around the track as normal, but then when it came to the guests, they had a makeshift rallycross track. So it went from the first few corners and then it went off into an off-road section through a water splash. Okay, water splash, entertaining. And it then went off into, I think, Hammerhead. Came back around and then off into another off-road section where there was a very tight hairpin, handbrake turn and that. And there was a jump as well. That was pretty good. I actually like this track layout. It's actually really... It adds more variety. It definitely adds more variety. Then obviously it goes back onto the main track, through the follow-through, through the second to last corner, into Gambon and across the line. Okay, that works. I actually like that layout. It's actually really good. At first, I reacted as if to say, they've ruined it. They've completely ruined the star in the reasonably priced car segment. But I can understand why they've made this change, just to give it more variety. And I think it kind of works now that I look back at it. And the final car test that he did was Matt LeBlanc in an aerial Nomad. The guy can drive. Not joking. Matt LeBlanc can really drive. And he took that aerial Nomad in, I can't remember where it was. I think it looked like the Nevada desert. I think that's where it could be, the Nevada desert. And he drove it like no bloody tomorrow. He really went for it. And I'm not going to lie, I actually posted on Facebook, I want an aerial Nomad. Simple as that. But overall, I thought this new version of Top Gear wasn't as bad as everyone's been making out it was going to be. One thing I will say though, Matt LeBlanc and Chris Evans are trying to copy the original humour that Clarkson, Hammond and May had. Please do not copy this style, because there's one thing for them to make the humour, but to copy another person's humour is not the right thing to do. I personally think that Chris Evans and Matt LeBlanc can have a really good chemistry if they had their own humour, their own style. If they try and copy someone else, it just isn't going to work, and it showed during the challenge segment. What else was I going to mention about it as well? Another thing I will also mention is how the show came across to me. Because as I said, I went in with an open mind and I didn't want to have any form of bias at all. To me, this didn't come across as a prime time motoring program, more of a family entertainment program. You know, those sort of family entertainment programs that you expect to see at 7 o'clock on a Saturday night rather than 8 o'clock on a Sunday evening. But no, honestly, it wasn't as bad as everyone has been making out it was going to be. Would I watch the whole series? Yes, I would watch the whole series just to give it a chance. Although, what I've been looking on Facebook and Twitter and even Instagram most recently is how people are comparing it to the original Top Gear and saying that it isn't Top Gear anymore. The reason why they're saying that it isn't Top Gear anymore because it doesn't have the original 3 hosts. That's going to be the nub. Everyone's going to think that this Top Gear is going to be terrible because it doesn't have the same style as what Clarkson, Hammond and May had. But my recommendation is this. Go in, watch it with an open mind as if this was a brand new Top Gear with brand new hosts and a brand new layout. Just go in with that mindset, and if you enjoy it, fantastic. If you don't, okay, that's fine. But that's pretty much all I wanted to say about it. Expect this video up as soon as possible when I make it. And yeah, that's it. That's my honest opinion about the new Top Gear. I didn't hate it as much as everyone's been making out. So, just, as I said, just go in and watch it with an open mindset rather than a bias. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.